I'm Helen Walsh. I'm 68 years old, a widow for almost a decade, and I hadn't been on a proper vacation since before my knees started clicking. When my son Nick and his wife Lindsay told me they were planning a family cruise this summer, my heart skipped. I imagined sunrises over open water, my grandkids in silly swim goggles, and one of those group dinners where everyone's cheeks ache from laughing too much. They said it would be for the whole family. Lindsay even asked if I preferred salmon or chicken, and Nick sent me the itinerary with a little thumbs-up emoji. I booked my cabin that same night. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small one on deck 6 close to the kids' club and the dining hall. I thought it'd be perfect. Close enough to be useful, but not in the way. That's always been my goal. Be helpful, be pleasant, be out of the way. 2 weeks before the cruise, I drove down to their place to drop off a beach umbrella and some extra sunscreen for the kids. I stayed for dinner, helped bathe Ellie and Ben, and folded a load of tiny socks that somehow still ended up mismatched. Around 9:30 p.m., I was in the hallway gathering my overnight bag when I heard them talking in the kitchen. They weren't whispering, just low and casual, like I wasn't 2 rooms away pulling on my jacket. Nick said it first. "If we bring her, we'll have to slow everything down." Lindsay replied without hesitation. "She's sweet, but you know how she is. She'll want to talk to everyone rest after everything, probably nap through the excursions." Nick didn't argue, just let out this small sigh like it had already been decided. I didn't move. I stood there holding my purse strap and stared at the framed photo on the hallway wall. It was from last Thanksgiving. Everyone was smiling. I was in the back holding a pie a little off-center. I remember baking that pie at 6 in the morning because Lindsay said the oven would be tied up all day. They hadn't meant for me to hear. That much I knew. But that almost made it worse. It wasn't anger. It was certainty. This wasn't about conflict. It was convenience. I left early the next morning. Said I had a dentist appointment. Nick hugged me distractedly at the door while texting someone with one hand. Lindsay offered to pack me some of the leftover lasagna, then forgot to do it. I didn't remind her. At 10:27 a.m., sitting in my kitchen with a cup of too strong tea, I pulled out my booking email and stared at it for a long while. My cabin, my deposit, my little corner of the ship. I thought about calling them, about confronting the both of them and saying something smart, maybe even a little scathing. But I didn't. I just stared. By 11:15 a.m., I was on the phone with the cruise line. "I'd like to cancel my current reservation," I told the woman on the other end. "But I'm not backing out of the trip. I'd like to upgrade. What's the most private suite you have available?" She paused. "That would be the presidential suite on deck 14. It includes a private terrace priority boarding and a personal concierge." I asked for the price. She read it apologetic, like she expected me to hang up. I didn't. I read her my card number slowly, clearly. Afterward, I sat in my quiet kitchen and looked out the window. The cat was sleeping on the windowsill. The hydrangeas were starting to bloom again. Somewhere my heart was doing something unfamiliar. Not breaking, not swelling, just shifting. It wasn't a decision made in anger. It wasn't even about them, not really. It was about me. I had spent the last decade stepping out of the photo-making room offering the better seat, biting my tongue. And now, with one phone call, I had taken a seat back. Not at their table, but at mine. I didn't tell them. When they texted the next week asking if I could feed their goldfish while they were gone, I said yes. Of course I said yes. That's who I've always been. But this time I made sure they didn't ask where I'd be, and I didn't volunteer it. Let them board first. Let them think I was back home watering plants. Let them think what they want. I had other plans. The ship rose above the port like a floating city. Even from the curb, I could tell it was bigger than anything I'd ever boarded before. My suitcase, the one with leather corners I'd only used twice, felt almost too small for the moment. A young man in a navy blazer took it from me at the curb. He checked the manifest, glanced at me, and smiled like he already knew who I was. "Welcome aboard, Miss Walsh." He said it like it mattered. Not ma'am. Not sweetheart. Not mom. Miss Walsh. By the time I stepped onto the marble floors of Deck 14, the noise from the boarding line below had faded. The hallway was quiet and wide. No luggage carts bumping against ankles, no kids crying over sunscreen, just soft lighting and the scent of lemon polish. My room was at the very end, past a double door that opened with a gentle push. Presidential suite. It even sounded like it belonged to someone else. Inside, the light was everywhere. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the sea, already starting to pull away from shore. The room wasn't cluttered or ornate. It was calm. Cream-colored walls, a low velvet couch, fresh, white orchids on the coffee table. I stood there for a while, not moving, not speaking, just breathing. A knock came within minutes. Lucas, the concierge, was neatly pressed and perfectly kind. He handed me a glass of something pale and fizzy. He asked if I preferred coffee or tea in the mornings, if I had any allergies, if I liked a firm pillow or soft. He said it all without rushing, like I was someone who had time. When he left, I wandered into the bedroom. The bed was wide and low, with crisp linen sheets tucked so tightly I almost didn't want to disturb them. I slipped off my shoes, sat on the edge, and looked out the window again. No one needed anything from me. No questions. No lists. No deadlines. Just the ocean, quiet and endless. At 6:15 p.m., I ordered dinner to the room. A white plate with grilled sea bass, a tiny sprig of parsley, and a glass of chilled Chardonnay. I ate it slowly by the window. No one asked how my day was. No one rushed me to finish. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The quiet said enough. It started with a thump against the wall. Not loud, just enough to rattle the frame of a painting above the dresser. I figured someone next door had dropped a shoe or kicked over a bag. The walls were solid, but ships were still ships. Everything shared space eventually. Then came the voices. Muffled, overlapping, unmistakable. A child whining about a lost stuffed animal. A woman sighing with the kind of sharpness that said she'd already repeated herself 5 times. And then a man's voice. Calm, slightly distracted. My son's voice. Nick. I froze standing by the closet, a sweater draped over my arm. I listened again, heart suddenly in my throat. The cadence, the rhythm, even the way he said, "Hold still, Ellie." It was him. It was them. My family. Right there. On the other side of that wall. I should have laughed. I almost did. What were the odds? Out of 1,000 cabins on this ship, we'd been placed side by side. Not just on the same floor, right next door. The suite I'd upgraded to on a quiet impulse, and their room likely assigned last minute due to a booking change. A cosmic joke. Neat. Cruel. Perfect. I moved closer to the wall, not to eavesdrop, but because I needed to know I hadn't imagined it. I heard Ellie asking if there was a pool just for kids. Then Ben chiming in, yelling about pizza. Lindsay hushed them. She sounded tired already, and we hadn't even left port 12 hours. Later that afternoon, I stepped out onto my terrace with a book in hand. I hadn't planned to sit. Just breathe a bit of sea air. Then I heard the slider next door open. I turned slowly before I could stop myself. Ellie was standing on their balcony, hair wet, wearing a pink swimsuit with sparkles. She turned her head and saw me, For a second, she squinted like she wasn't sure if I was real. I gave her a small wave. Not big, not dramatic, just enough to say, "I see you." Her mouth opened like she might say something, then someone inside called her name. She turned and disappeared. The door slid shut behind her. I went back inside and pulled the curtain, not out of fear, just instinct. I wasn't ready to be seen. Not yet. Let them wonder. Let them think I was home. I had time. The third day brought a light breeze and just enough sun to make everything feel slightly more alive. I'd slept in later than usual, waking to the sound of gulls and the hush of water sliding past the hull. After breakfast, I wandered down to the art gallery near the atrium, pretending to study brushstrokes, but mostly just enjoying being surrounded by quiet. That's where I met Marla. She was wearing a wide straw hat indoors and flipping through postcards like they were tarot cards. I made a comment about the artist's overuse of blue, and she laughed like we'd known each other longer than 2 minutes. She was 72, widowed twice, and traveling alone for the 3rd time in a row. Her daughter, she said, had begged her not to go. Too long, too much, too tiring. "That's why I booked it," she said. Pure spite. I liked her immediately. Marla told me about a dance class later that afternoon. Just for fun, she said. The instructor's from Argentina and apparently charming enough to get women our age to twirl. I almost said no. My knees, my balance, my pride. But at 2:15 p.m. I showed up. The room was already full of women in soft-soled shoes and floral scarves. The music was light, cheerful, not demanding. The instructor clapped out a rhythm and called out steps. I moved like someone who hadn't done this in years, which was true. But Marla gave me a wink. I'm not here to impress. I'm here to remember. Near the end of the session, a tall man in a navy shirt stepped forward and asked if I'd like to finish the last dance. His name was Clark, 66, retired journalist. He held out his hand without ceremony and smiled like the question didn't need to be answered. We moved slowly at first. His touch was light, and I followed his lead like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't think about the steps. I thought about my hips remembering how to shift, my spine remembering upright, my breath remembering how to laugh. That evening, I dressed in the emerald blouse I'd brought and never worn. It caught the light in a way that felt almost too bold. At 7:30 p.m., I walked into the ballroom. Strings were playing something soft. Waiters glided between tables and conversations rose and fell like tides. Clark spotted me first. He didn't rush, just lifted his glass and nodded. I joined him. He asked if I wanted to dance again. I said yes before my mind had time to edit me. Halfway through the second song, I felt it. A shift in the air. A pair of eyes watching. I glanced toward the far end of the ballroom and saw Nick standing there stiff in his too tight dress shirt watching me. Not as a son watches his mother. Not with ownership or expectation, but with something quieter. Hesitation, maybe. Uncertainty. I didn't break step. Clark twirled me gently, and I let the music hold the moment longer than it needed to. By the end of the song, Nick had turned and disappeared through the side doors. I didn't follow. The next morning at 10:10 a.m., I was stirring cream into my coffee at the cafe near the library when he found me. He slid into the seat across from mine without asking, fingers already wrapped around a cup of his own. "You're here." It wasn't a question. I nodded. "I've been here since day one. Why didn't you tell us?" "Because you didn't ask." He shifted in his chair. "Lindsay thought you'd be more comfortable at home." "You mean easier?" He didn't argue, just stared down at the sugar packet he was turning in his hand. "I thought it would be simpler," he said finally. "For everyone." I let the words sit. I took a sip from my cup. "Do you think I needed simple?" He looked up. "I don't know what you needed." That's the first honest thing you've said in years." His face softened. "You looked happy last night." "I was." He leaned back. "I never thought I'd see you dancing like that again." "Neither did I." He hesitated. "I'm sorry." "I know." We sat in silence for a moment, not awkward, just stretched thin from the years in between. I didn't reach across the table. I didn't fill the pause. I let it breathe. Finally, I said I didn't come here to prove a point. I came here to remember I still could. He nodded. "That makes sense. We didn't solve anything. There were no hugs, no tears. But when he stood, he placed a hand gently on my shoulder and left it there for a beat longer than necessary. I stayed seated after he left, not to cry, not to think, just to sit. The coffee was still warm, the music overhead soft. I watched the ocean outside the window and thought I didn't ask for this dance, but maybe I needed it anyway. On the final night of the cruise, just after 7:20 p.m., a soft knock came at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I had planned to eat in my suite again, maybe order something indulgent like warm apple tart and listen to the ocean until it was time to pack. But when I opened the door, Ellie was standing there in her sandals and a dress with tiny blue whales stitched across the hem. She looked up at me, holding a folded note in both hands. "It's from Mom," she said. Then she added, "Are you coming to dinner?" I opened the note after she ran back down the hall. Lindsay's handwriting was tight, careful. She wrote that it was the last formal dinner, and if I wanted to join, there would be a seat saved. No pressure, just space. I stood there for a while with the note in my hand. Then I reached for the shawl I'd brought but never worn. It was soft lavender with tassels, and still smelled faintly of cedar. I pinned my hair back, checked the mirror once, and walked out without overthinking it. The dining room was lit low in warm gold reflections dancing off the cutlery. I spotted them before they saw me. Nick was helping Ben into a booster seat. Lindsay was adjusting Ellie's napkin. I made my way across the floor slowly, not stalling, just steady. When I reached the table, Nick stood. Lindsay did too, though a beat slower. Ellie scooted her chair and patted the seat beside her. I took it. Dinner moved gently, mostly filled with talk of excursions, desserts, what time to disembark in the morning. I listened more than I spoke. My heart felt full and far away at once. It was near the end, over coffee and little cakes, when Lindsay leaned in slightly and asked if I'd walk with her. We found a spot by the railing on the top deck. The breeze had picked up. Her arms were folded across her chest like she didn't know what to do with them. She said she hadn't meant to push me out. Not really. She said she'd been dealing with something she didn't tell Nick about. That she lost a pregnancy in March and hadn't told anyone but her sister. Her voice cracked once, then settled. She said she couldn't be around too much care. That every kindness from me made her feel like she was failing. That I reminded her of what she couldn't give her own kids anymore. She didn't cry. She just said it and waited. I let the silence last longer than either of us liked. Then I nodded and said, "I'm sorry you went through that alone. But next time, don't use me as your shield. If you need space, ask for it. Don't wrap it in politeness." She nodded. She looked tired in a real way. Not from the kids. From pretending. I told her I'd come to dinner tonight because I wanted to, not because she asked. That I forgave her. But that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant drawing a better map going forward. We didn't hug. We didn't make promises. We just stood side by side until the wind picked up enough to chase us back inside. When I returned to my suite, the bed had been turned down and a small card rested on the pillow. It was from Ellie. A folded sheet of notebook paper with a drawing done in green crayon. It was the ship. And on the top deck, a tiny square with a stick figure and a chair. Grandma's balcony, she'd written at the bottom. I held it in my lap for a long time. The lines were crooked. The figure barely resembled anything human. But I knew exactly who it was. I didn't come here to be seen, but somehow I was. Not for what I do, not for what I give, just for who I am. And for now, that was enough.